guys, welcome back to another episode of My Miniature Things. My name is Saeed. You guys, I came up with the best idea. You know how in every single video we make like a different scene, so it's like the dolls are going to like a different place like every week? I was thinking to do like a series on my channel called Dolls Day Out. So like every week you guys can tune in to see where the dolls are going this week. Isn't that so cute? Ah! Like they've already went to a pool party, they went to a club. Last week they went to the most beautiful bakery you've ever laid your eyes on. And I was thinking this week they can go to a bowling alley for their Dolls Day Out. I've only ever went to a bowling alley like one time, but it was so much fun and I want my dolls to have the same experience. So without further ado, let's start building a bowling alley for this week's episode of Dolls Day Out. So as usual, let's start with our floors. This is probably going to be the biggest build, like widest build that we've ever done on this channel. So I joined 3 pieces of foam board together using duct tape, and I covered the entire thing in this white and black checkered contact paper that I found on Amazon. Now originally when I joined all these pieces of foam board together, we had a floor that measures 30 inches by 60 inches, but I didn't have enough contact paper to cover the full 60 inches, so I had to end up hacking off about 2.5 inches from that side. So now our floor measures 30 inches by 57.5 inches, not 60 inches. So let me give you the quick breakdown of what I'm planning here. Before we start, I kind of want to do like the little area like where you pay to bowl and like you get your shoes and stuff like right over there. We're going to do a front door over here on this side. So I want that right next to the front door. Then right next to that, I kind of want to do like a pool table with like vending machines and stuff like that. And next to that, I want to do like a little cafe, like bar area where you can grab a bite to eat. Maybe a little sitting area, we'll see. And then I also want to put lockers, but I'm not really sure where I'm going to place the lockers yet. And you guys, did you notice that everything that I just listed, bowling lanes, were not listed in there? That's because this is going to be so big. This is literally just the entrance area, and then we're going to do the bowling lanes over there to the right. So let's get started with the walls. I want to start with the left wall on that side that has the front door on it. Oh, I also forgot to mention that I did make a little extension that I want to add back here to give us a little bit more room for when we make the space for where the dolls pay for their shoes. It measures 4 inches by 20 inches, and that's probably the reason why I didn't have enough contact paper to cover the entire floor. Oopsie. But now our side wall, instead of being 30 inches, it's 34 inches. So again, I joined my foam board. This time I only joined 2 pieces. This piece measures 20 inches wide by 30 inches tall, and this piece measures 14 inches wide by 30 inches tall, giving me a piece that measures 34 inches wide by 30 inches tall. I'm now going to cover the top of it in this dark blue contact paper that I found on Amazon. And the reason why I only covered the top of it was because, as I said, we are going to put doors on this wall, and we're also going to put shelving units on this side to hold the bowling shoes. So at the end of it, I really don't think any of this is going to be visible, so we are going to try to save contact paper where we can, because that stuff is expensive. Well, not really. It was $5. But it adds up. I then went ahead and I made my markings for where I want my door to be. You can't really see the markings up here because the blue is so dark, but it does measure 10.5 inches wide by 15.5 inches tall and about 11 inches away from this side. I then cut it out, and I did leave a 1/4 strip down at the bottom because I did decide we are going to make these working doors. I know, so exciting for those of you guys who are always obsessed with my doors and drawers working. Today is your day, honey. Let's now cut a 1-inch strip of foam board down to 15.5 inches. Cut a piece of wood grain contact paper down to size. I stick it on my 1-inch strip of foam board, but I only roll one of the sides. We are now going to line up the side that is not rolled with the side of the door. We can now roll this piece that we didn't roll earlier over both of those edges, giving us a nice wooden door frame with no seams. I repeated that same step all the way around. I then cut a 1/4 strip of foam board down to 10.5 inches, and I cover it in silver craft paper and place it down at the bottom to add some strength to the bottom of our door frame. Cut a 1/2 inch strip of craft paper to clean up our edges. You guys, this is so hard to film because the piece is so big. Okay, finally that piece is done and over with. It was so big that I couldn't film it on my cutting mat. I couldn't even cut it on my cutting mat. You guys, I had to make this piece on the floor. But now that it's done, let's start working on the actual doors with more manageable sized pieces where we can actually work on the cutting mat. So let's head over there right now and start building some doors for this door frame. Let's start by cutting a piece of foam board down to 5 inches by 15 inches. And now let's use a ruler and pencil to draw a 1-inch border all the way around like this. And now we are going to cut on those lines to remove the middle like this. I then covered my piece in silver contact paper that I found at my local dollar store. And now I'm also going to trim the inside of my edges in 1/4 strips of silver contact paper. And I do that all the way around on my inside edges. And a couple of you asked me, what do I use to stick my craft paper to my foam board? I use Elmer's school glue, and it has to be the purple one or else it just doesn't work. But I use this if it's anything bigger than 1/4 to like 1/2 inch. So like larger surfaces like this, I will use the school glue. But when it comes to the sides of my foam board, like 1/4 inch strips or maybe even 1/2 inch strips, I use hot glue. In my experience, when you try to use the hot glue for larger surfaces such as this, it just doesn't come out as smooth. It comes out kind of bumpy actually. But yeah, now you know. Next, let's cut a piece of plexiglass down to 5 inches by 15 inches, flip over our silver piece and place it on the back. I also use hot glue for this part, but if you're using clear packaging, you might want to let your glue cool down for like 3 to 5 seconds, because the initial heat from your hot glue could end up warping your packaging. And that's definitely not something that we want. You also don't want to wait too long for it to cool down, because that's also not something that you want. I repeat to make a second piece just like this piece, covering the sides and the top in silver contact paper, but I don't put plexiglass in this piece. Instead, I flip the piece with the plexiglass over and place our second piece right over it, making sure to line up your edges from the front and the back so that it looks flush like this, and then your glass is in the middle. Cut 1/2-inch strips of your silver craft paper so that we can clean up the sides, and I do it for all 4 of my sides. I then cut 2 strips of foam board and covered it all the way around in my silver contact paper except for the back, and they measure a little over 1/4 inch wide by 4 inches long, and I'm just going to place this on the front about 9 inches up. I then place the other one on the back of it, giving me a silver glass door with silver handles. I repeated to make another one, and now we have 2 silver glass doors with silver handles. Now let's install the doors, and I set my camera up a little bit differently just so that we can fit the entire piece into the frame and I can actually work on it without it being too cumbersome. Let's use a straight pin to poke a hole on the opposite side of the door where the handle is on the top. And when you feel like you've gotten half of the straight pin through the foam board into the door and then you have half of it hanging out, you take some wire cutters and you just cut off the head of the pin. And as you can see, this measures about 1/4 inch away from the edge. I'm now going to take a second straight pin and go a 1/4 inch away from this corner and make a hole in the middle. We are now going to insert the straight pin in our door into that hole that we just made. And that attaches the top of the door to the top of the door frame. So now let's work on the bottom. First, you got to line up your doors and make sure that they're straight. And then you take another straight pin and go a 1/4 inch away from the edge, and you just go straight through the middle of that 1/4 inch piece into the door. Once you've gotten your piece in there, you take your wire cutters again and you just snip off the edge. Use the dull side or the flat side of your wire cutters to push the remaining of the pin into the foam board. I repeated all the same steps for the other side, and now we have 2 working silver glass doors for our bowling alley. And you guys, it looks so super duper cute. I am obsessed with it. It's so adorable. I then covered only half of a sheet of foam board in my contact paper, just like we did for this side, and I use it as my back wall. It measures 20 inches wide by 30 inches tall, and then my little side wall over there only measures 4 inches wide by 30 inches tall, and again, I only cover the top of it. I think we're just gonna make this little area first, like where the dolls ring up, and then see what parts of the wall needs to be covered and then go back and cover them, since we are trying to save on contact paper. But before we make that little area over there, I feel like I figured out where I'm gonna put the lockers, you guys. I think we should put it right over here on this wall. So let's start making those now. So let's start by cutting a piece of foam board down to 2.5 inches by 4 inches. And I don't have red contact paper, but I ended up using red craft paper to cover my piece. And I did use the Elmer's school glue to stick it on there. Now let's cut a piece of silver craft paper down to 2.5 by 4 inches. Flip it over and draw a 1/4 inch border around the edges. Cut on the lines drawn and remove the middle piece to give us a silver border that we can now place on our red piece. Let's now cut a 1/4 inch strip of our silver paper and use it to clean up our edges. And I did it all the way around. I then cut a really thin strip of silver craft paper, cut it into 3/4 inch pieces, and I placed them on the front of my door to create the little slits that locker doors have. I have these little beads that I found at the dollar store that we can use as a combination thingy for our locker. Now my bead does have a hole in the middle, so I'm going to use this bead, which I know also has a hole in the middle, but I'm going to turn it to the side and place it on top of the hole to cover it up. I then repeated to make 8 more, and you guys, this took so long, I'm not gonna lie. I didn't really know what I was getting myself into when I decided to go with this design for the doors. But it's okay, we're already here, so let's just go with it. I then cut a piece of foam board that measures 10 inches by 15 inches, and I cover it in my red craft paper. I then start placing my doors on this piece about 1/2 inch apart. So you should end up with something that looks like this, but I do want to make one of the doors, this door, a working door. So before gluing all of this down, I put everything where I think I want it to be, and now I'm going to use my pencil to mark exactly where this door should be. I then remove my doors and you can see right where I marked it. And we are going to make a cutout right here, but first I want to add some hinges to my doors, but these are gold. So I spray paint them silver, and to attach them to my door, I flip my door over and attach it to the opposite side of where my combination lock is. I place it right up against the edge, and then I take my screw and I poke it in there. And then I use a really tiny screwdriver to drive it in all the way. Actually, I can't drive it in all the way. It was poking through the other side of the foam board, so I'm just going to use my wire cutters and cut it down a bit. I repeat it for my other screws, and once my hinges are attached, I flip it back over, place it on my piece right where we marked before, and then I make little markings where the hinges are. I then drew lines that are a little bit smaller than my door, and I cut it out, trimmed my edges in silver craft paper, and now I can attach my door over my opening. I basically just open it and line up the sides of my hinges to the sides of my opening, giving me a working door for one of my lockers. I added in my other doors, and now let's make the inside of this locker before we finish it up. I cut a piece that measures 2¼ by 4 inches and another piece that measures 1½ by 4 inches, and I join them together on the side. I then repeat the same thing for the other side. Place a piece that measures 3 inches by 1½ on the top and another one at the bottom, giving us a little box that we can now place in the back of our piece, giving us the inside of our locker. Now let's add a piece that measures 2½ inches by 15 inches to one of the sides that measures 15 inches, a piece that measures 2½ by 9½ to the top, and then another piece that measures 2½ by 15 inches to the other side. Trim all of my edges in silver craft paper, and I do it all the way around, giving us the cutest little set of lockers that can go right up against the wall and cover up all of that pink. I am obsessed. It looks so cute, but you know what would look even cuter? If we had a little bench right here so the dolls can sit while they're changing their shoes. So let's start by cutting a piece of foam board down to 8 inches, and then for the width, because this is going to be a bench, I'm going to use these wooden craft sticks to line the top of it just to give it some more support. So the width of my foam board would be the width of 2 craft sticks put together, which for me is a little bit less than 2½ inches. So I glue it on there, and then I take my handy dandy scissors and I use it to trim off the excess. I then repeated it for the other side, and now I have a piece that has no problem holding a doll's weight. Cut my wooden craft stick down to 3/4 inch wide and place it on the side of my bench, and I repeated it all the way around, giving us a nice sturdy top for our bench with a wood finish. Let's now use a couple wooden dowels to cut 4 3-inch pieces, paint them black, and add them to the bottom of our bench to create legs. And now our dolls have a cute little place to sit when they're changing into their bowling shoes. I also made this sign off of a website that creates AI images. So I cut it out and I added it to a piece of foam board, and I'm just gonna add it right above our lockers. And you guys, look at how cute this little locker section came out. I am obsessed. But now that the dolls have a cute little place where they can sit and change into their bowling shoes, let's make a cute little place where they can actually get their bowling shoes right over there. Let's start by cutting a piece of foam board down to 20 inches by 16 inches. I measured 6½ inches up from the bottom, and I placed a 6-inch strip of contact paper. And that's because, as I said, we are trying to save on contact paper, so let's only cover the parts that are going to be visible. I then cut a second piece that measures 2½ by 20 inches, and again, I only cover the parts that are going to be visible because we are going to place this piece on the side right here, and then we are going to place a piece that measures 6½ by 16 inches over here on the side. And as you can see, I covered this piece also in my contact paper, and I framed it in craft paper. Actually, before we place this piece in, let's cut 4 pieces of foam board that measure 3 inches by 4½ inches, and I cover it all the way around in my contact paper, and I start placing them on this piece every ½ inch. I did it all the way across, but I left a bigger gap between these doors just because I wanted to add a design detail with my silver craft paper to separate the 2 sets of doors. Then let's cut a few 1/4-inch strips of our craft paper and place them on our doors to create some door handles. And now I can add my piece to my front bottom corner. Let's now place our piece upright. Cut a piece that measures 2½ by 16 inches and cover the top, roll the edge, and place it right on the top of that 6½ inch piece that we just put in. Cut a 2 by 5 inch piece, and I clean up the sides with my silver contact paper, and I place it about 1½ inches up from my countertop. I then repeat with another 2 by 5 inch piece, 1.5 inches over that, giving me 2 shelves. And then we close it up with another 2 by 5 inch piece, but this one I cover on both sides, and I roll the edge and I place it right up against the side to close it up. The next section, I'm only going to do 1 shelf in the middle because I want to do shoes on these shelves. That's why I made them smaller. And in the middle, I'm going to put some bowling balls, so I need some more space. I then finished up the other side by mirroring what I did on this side. Let's now close this up by cutting a piece that measures 2¼ by 16 inches and placing it right across the top of our shelves. I repeat the same thing for the tippy top. And because this is going to go in the area where the dolls actually pay to bowl, I cut a large piece that measures 8½ inches by 16½ inches. And I know that I messed up with my contact paper, but it's okay. I'm hoping that the menus cover it. And I place it right over this part, lining up the edge of this foam board to the edge of this piece, and this edge to the edge of this piece, like this. And now we can place some price menus on here so the dolls know how much to pay. I found these on Google and I modified them just a little bit by putting my channel name on there. So I cut them out and placed them on pieces of foam board, and I framed them in silver contact paper. And now we can place them on the top of our piece, giving us the cutest little shelving unit that the dolls can use to store their bowling shoes and bowling balls, and it also includes the price list for our bowling alley. But I do feel like we don't have enough space over here for bowling shoes, and since this is where the dolls are going to be renting their bowling shoes from, let's make another shelving unit over on this wall that's only going to be for bowling shoes. So let's start by cutting a black piece of foam board down to 6 inches by 15 inches, and I make some lines on it where I wanted to place my shelves. I started by placing a line 1 inch up from the bottom, and then every line after that is 2 1/4 inches apart. Except for when I get to the top right here, I have a little bit of a taller shelf. It measures about 3 inches. For the side piece, I cut another piece that measures 2 1/4 by 15 inches, and I make all of the same markings as I did on the back piece, and then I place it on the side, and I line up those markings exactly on point. I then cut a 1 inch strip of foam board and I place it down to the bottom of my back piece, and then another 1 inch strip that measures 6 inches out on my black foam board, about 1/2 inch away from the edge on the bottom of the side. Place a piece that measures 2 inches by 6 inches on top of that. Let's now cut a few pieces that measure 2 inches by 1 1/4 inches, and we are just going to start placing these on our lines, making sure that when you place your little piece of foam board in there that it lines up perfectly with your lines. Now let's cut a piece of foam board that measures 2 inches by 14 inches, and I make the same markings, but I place the markings on this side of my shelf, and then I repeat with 1 3/4 inch by 2 inch pieces of foam board on the other side, going all the way up. I then repeated it one more time, and now we can add another 2 1/4 by 15 inch piece to the other side to close it off. I then clean up all of my edges in my silver craft paper, and it really came together. I was a little bit worried, I'm not gonna lie. Like, while we were working on it, it was looking so messy, but I'm pretty happy with the way that it came out. For the top, I'm gonna measure a piece that measures 2 1/4 inches by 9 1/2 inches, and I'm gonna place this over the top like this, with about 1/2 inch hanging over on this side and about 2 1/2 inches hanging over on this side, because we have this space right here between the shelving unit and this wall that I wanna fill up. So this extra 2 1/2 inch piece will slide right in there and do the job. And I think it looks amazing. And as you can see, I did go ahead and I covered this little piece right here in my contact paper just because it is going to be showing. But now I think we need to build a countertop for the front. So let's start by cutting a piece of foam board down to 6 1/2 inches by 19 1/2 inches. And 2 more pieces that I cover in my black contact paper, they measure 2 1/4 inches by 6 1/2 inches. And we're just going to place these on the side of our 19 1/2 inch piece. And I do it on both sides. Let's now cut a piece that measures 3 inches by 20 inches. And I covered this one in this steel looking contact paper that I found on Amazon, and I place it right on the top. I noticed that on my left side, my countertop is flush with the side of my counter, and that's because when I place this piece into the diorama, I want this side of it to go flush up against the wall, whereas the front and the other side have about 1/2 inch overhang. Now this is what we have so far, and I do think it's a little bit plain, so let's dress it up a bit. I made another sign just like we did for the lockers with one of my AI printables, and I trimmed it all the way around in silver contact paper, and now I'm just going to place this right on the front in the middle. Cut a 1 inch strip of foam board and cover it in my wood grain contact paper. Add a 1/2 inch strip of silver craft paper to the top and to the bottom. Then use 1/4 inch strips of silver craft paper to clean up the sides and add some dimension down the middle. I repeated to make 4 of them, and I added it to the front of my piece along with a few extra strips of craft paper and a couple extra printables, giving us the cutest little front desk that the dolls can go to rent their shoes. Now we need a cash register, so let's make one. I have these printables that again I created on AI, so let's cut one out and stick it onto a piece of foam board. Cut out the keyboard and wrap the edges in some black craft paper. Cut 2 more pieces of foam board and stick them together, and these should be about 1/4 inch bigger than your keyboard piece. Cover the top of that piece that we doubled in silver craft paper and then trim the edges in black craft paper. And now we can place our keyboard right up against the edge in the middle of our piece in the back. I then cut out the total screen and I wrap the sides of it in black craft paper just like we did for the cash register. Cut a 1/4 inch strip of foam board, cover the sides of it in silver craft paper, and I stick it on the back in the middle of my cash register. I painted the head of a pin black, and I'm just going to insert that in the top of my display screen and push it all the way through so it comes out the bottom. And now we can push the remainder of the pin into this piece that we just installed onto the cash register. Add a bead to the front for the drawer handle, and now we have a cash register with a swivel screen so the dolls can turn it around to show the customers the total. And now we have have a little cash register finishing off our little section where our dolls rent their shoes. But since our countertop is so long, I made a second cash register so the dolls can ring up multiple customers at once so that the lines don't back up. I then made a few more signs using my AI printables. The exit sign over the door and this little bowling sign right over here to fill in this space. And these ones I'm gonna place right over this little shelf. And I just realized that I printed this one twice, but this one's a little bit bigger than this one. It's also on glossy paper. I got this one printed at Office Depot, and I'm just gonna place this one right up here. So now the dolls have no confusion that this is where you get your bowling shoes, you guys. Shoes, shoes, shoes. And now, you guys, I think we are completely finished with this section of the entry to our bowling alley. So let's now move on to this part over here where I want to do the vending machines and the pool table. So I joined a couple pieces of foam board and I covered only the parts that are going to be visible. Now let's make some vending machines to cover up all of this white foam board. I found this vending machine printable online and I got it printed at Office Depot. That's why it's a little bit shiny. But we are only going to be using the part with the snacks and this little part over here on the side. So I cut them out and I placed the snacks on a piece of foam board that measures 4 inches by 8.5 inches. Let's now cut 1-inch strips of foam board that measure 8.5 inches and place it on either side. And then 2 more 1.5-inch strips that measure 4.5 inches to the top and the bottom, giving us a piece that looks like this, but we're going to set this aside for a minute. Let's cut a black piece of foam board down to 13 inches by 6 inches. And I made markings for a little cutout right here. It measures 4 inches by 8 inches. So it's a little bit smaller than the piece with the snacks. I then cut it out, and I also made a smaller little box down at the bottom for when the snacks fall out. It measures 1.25 by 2 inches, and I also cut that out. Oops, she's still stuck on there. Got her. Trimmed my edges in my silver craft paper on the outside and on the inside. Cut a piece of plexiglass down to size and place it in the back. And now we can place the first piece that we made with the snacks in the back. I then made a smaller box using the same steps we used to make the box for the snacks, but this one measures 2.25 by 3.25, and I place it under the smaller opening. Cut a black piece of foam board that measures 3.25 by 13 inches and place it on the side. 2 pieces that measure 3.25 by 5.5, and we place one on the top and the other one on the bottom. And then 1 more piece that measures 3.25 by 13 inches to the other side. I then trim all of my edges in silver craft paper, and now we can add our control panel piece that we cut out earlier to the front. We can place a little bag of potato chips right down here to give us the cutest little doll vending machine you've ever seen in your life. You guys, this is so cute. And while this is super duper cute and I'm obsessed with it, it is a little bit tedious to make. So let's see if we can find an easier way to make a vending machine. I also found this printable on Google, and I also printed it at Office Depot. And I made a box with the same exact measurements as the first vending machine. Place my box down on the table, and then I can take my printable and start wrapping it around my box. And when I'm done wrapping my printable all the way around, I am now going to cut out this little piece right here. Like this. Clean up the edges with black craft paper and add a little black box just like we did with the first vending machine to the back of the opening. Add a little can of soda to the opening, and now we have another vending machine, but it was a lot easier to make. I repeated to make another one. So now that we have a few vending machines for our bowling alley, let's start making our pool table. I found this miniature pool set at my local dollar store. It was only $1.99, and I thought it was the perfect size for our 1/6 scale dolls. So let's see if we can get this out of the packaging. So we basically just get the top of the pool table and then this little rectangle thing that keeps all the little balls in place and a couple pool sticks. So since we only got the top of the pool table, let's see if we can now make a bottom for it with some legs. I don't really play pool, so I don't really know what these are for, but I think they go on the fingers so that you can hit the pool sticks like this. I don't know. If anybody knows what these are for, please let me know. My piece actually measures about 10.5 inches across by about 7 inches. So to build the bottom of our pool table, I cut 4 pieces. They all measure 2.5 inches wide. These 2 over here measure 6 inches long, and these 2 over here measure 10 inches long. Keep in mind that those measurements are for this pool table because I actually have seen this pool table at the Dollar Tree before, just a little bit smaller. I actually have it. You can see it is a little bit smaller. So make sure to check the dimensions of your pool table if you decide to make this before you cut your pieces. I'm now going to cover all of these pieces in this brown contact paper, and you guys, this is literally all I have left. So let's hope and pray that this is enough for the entire pool table. Now that I have all of my pieces covered in contact paper, let's start attaching it to the pool table. And you guys, if you notice, I did put the grain of the wood going horizontal on all of my pieces. It just looks a lot better that way. Let's now glue one of the 10-inch pieces to the longer side of our pool table. table. Then we can add one of the 6-inch pieces to the shorter side, add our second 6-inch piece to the other side, followed by our other 10-inch piece on the other side. I then added some silver trim to the side so that it matches the rest of the room. And if you ask me, it would have looked better in gold, but since we're doing silver today, I'm gonna let it slide. For the legs, I'm gonna use this 5/8 wooden dowel that I found at Home Depot. I cut it down to 6.5 inches and I covered it all the way around in my wood grain contact paper. I also added some of the silver trim down to the bottom so that it matches our pool table. And now we can add it right under our pool table, right against the corner. I then repeated for the other corners, giving us legs for our pool table. But you guys, now that it's all like put together, I'm not really feeling this top. I feel like it's making it look really cheap. So let's see if we can pop this out. And I'm gonna see if I can use this green felt that my sister gave me to cover over this piece. So I cut a piece down to size and I stick it over my insert. I then flip it over and use the edges as a guide to carefully cut around it to give me a new piece that looks 10 million times better. And for the pool sticks, I'm not really feeling the orange. It doesn't really match our table. So I spray painted both the ends silver, covered the rest of it in my wood grain contact paper, and then I added some black to the top. I then added a couple design elements on either side, and I cut little circles of silver craft paper and I placed them in the pockets. And you guys, I am blown away by this one. I am obsessed. So far, everything is looking amazing. So let's move on to the snack bar. I made a little countertop using the same exact steps that we used to make that countertop over there. This one's just a little bit smaller. It measures 6.5 inches tall by 7.5 inches wide. And I'm just gonna place this one right over here. I also made this industrial style refrigerator for one of my TikTok videos. And if you guys want a tutorial on how to make that, please leave comments down below and let me know. Because look, the door's actually open. And you guys, I completely 100% ran out of that blue contact paper. Can you believe that? I bought 118 inches of that and it's gone. But I was thinking that we can use this little food display thingy that I made for one of my TikTok videos to cover up that white foam board. I then made another countertop exactly like how we made the front desk countertop, but this one's a little bit shorter. It's only 15 inches wide and it says snacks instead of shoes. And we can place that right about here. I also made another menu, but this one is for food. As you can see, there's burgers and fries and hot dogs and stuff like that. Stuff that's perfect for a bowling alley, and we can just place that right up here. I also made another cash register. The first one we use this printable, but then I ended up using this one for the second one. That's why it looks a little bit different. But it was all the same exact steps that I followed. I just used a different printable, and I'm just gonna put this right here in the middle. Now I sped through the section just because I already showed you guys how to make most of this stuff when we made the front desk section. But now we need a little seating area. So let's make some tables and stools. So let's start by cutting a wooden dowel down to 6 3/4 inches. I then covered it in black contact paper and added some silver craft paper to the end. Cut a piece of foam board down to 2.5 by 3 1/4 and I covered my sides in silver craft paper. And now I'm going to place my wooden dowel right in the middle, giving us the base of our table. For the tabletop, I cut a piece that measures 4 inches by 3 inches and I covered it all the way around in my silver craft paper. And I just placed it right on the top in the middle, giving me a quick and easy table for our bowling alley. Now we need some stools. Cut 2 pieces of foam board that measure 3 inches by 2 1/4 and stick them together. I covered the top in red craft foam, and now let's trim the sides with silver craft paper, giving us the seat for our stool. Now let's start working on the actual stand for the stool. So I cut a wooden dowel down to 5 inches. It's a little bit smaller than the one that we use for the table, and I covered it in silver contact paper. And then I drilled a hole about 1.5 inches up all the way through to the other side. I have this piece of aluminum metal that I'm going to use my pliers and just bend it into a rectangle. I move over 2 more inches and bend it again. And then I move up 1.5 inches and I bend it again. And then I repeat for the other corner. I then trim off any of the excess and I'm just going to insert it into that hole that I drilled and then glue it in place. I then cut a piece that measures 2 3/4 by 2 inches and I place my wooden dowel right in the middle. And now I can place my seat on the top. Let's now cut about 2.5 inches off of our aluminum rod and bend it about halfway through. Add a little bead on one of the ends. Flip our stool over and measure about maybe 1/4 inch over from the wooden dowel and stick this little piece in. To make a little bar stool with a footrest and a little thing to like pump it up to like make it taller. I don't really know what they call that, but it looks so cute. I repeated to make another table and a few more stools, and now we have an actual seating area, you guys, where the dolls can sit and enjoy their snacks while they're bowling. I also made another sign using my printables, and I trimmed the edges in my silver craft paper And I think we can place this right up here. So this is what it's looking like so far, you guys, and it looks amazing. But you guys, we still don't have bowling lanes. So let's start making those right now over there on the right. Let's start with our floor. I covered a sheet of foam board in this light brown wood grain contact paper that I found on Amazon. And I made these printables of bowling lanes at Office Depot. So I joined 2 pieces of foam board and I stick them all the way across about 2 inches apart. But you guys, it's kind of bothering me how you can see the join of each printable. But this is all I have, so we're just gonna go for it and hope it works out. For the back wall, as I said, I am completely out of that dark blue contact paper, so we're gonna have to switch it up. So let's see what we get when we mix this light blue contact paper that I found on Amazon and this dark red brick that I found at Joann's. You guys, I'm not really sure how I feel about this. Let's see if we add some printables, if we can make it look a little bit better. Okay, I think that amped it up and really took it to another level, but let's see what else we can do to tie this space in with the rest of the bowling alley. I have these printables that I also got at Joann's, and I was gonna use them on that back wall, but I just thought it was a little bit too busy for such a large space. But I was thinking, you know how bowling alleys have like the screens over where like they put the bowling pins, and they always have like really fun, like cool designs going on there? Not that I would know. Because as I said, I've only been to a bowling alley once, but I Googled it and they all have screens over where the bowling pins go, and they all have really cool designs going on. So let's see if we can make a few LED screens using this craft paper. Now our sidewall over there on that side measures 30 inches. So I stick 2 pieces of foam board together. This piece measures 20 inches and this piece measures 10 inches, and they both are 30 inches tall. And as you can see, I placed the craft paper going all the way across about 4 inches from the bottom, and then I filled in the rest with black contact paper. Let's now place it over here on the side over our bowling lane. Let's now use a pencil to mark the sides of each bowling lane on our side wall. Cut on those lines up to where the craft paper starts and remove that piece. And I do it for all 3 lanes. I then cover the pieces that are left in silver craft paper. And since these are going to be screens, let's add some plexiglass over it. And I did it going all the way across my entire pattern piece. I then cut a few 1-inch strips of foam board and I covered them all the way around in my silver contact paper, and I placed one down at the bottom and a second one up to the top, and then 2 more on either side. Well, this is gonna go on the other side. You can't see it, but it's gonna be over there. And then of course I didn't have a piece of plexiglass that was large enough to cover this entire thing without joining it. And I joined it right here and right here. I'm not really sure if you can see it on camera, but I cut 2 more of my 1-inch strips that are covered in silver paper, and I place it right over the joining. Finishing up our LED screens with fun designs on it. Now let's move our attention down here and work on the part where our bowling pins go. I cut a black piece of foam board down to the size of my opening. It measures about 7.5 inches wide by 4 inches tall. 2 more pieces that measure 4 inches by 5 inches, and I place it on either side of the first piece that measures 4 inches. And place a piece that measures 8 inches by 5 inches on the top. We can now place that piece right in the back of the opening. I repeated it for the other 2, and now we have a place for the dolls to put their bowling pins. Speaking of bowling pins, I found these at my local dollar store. They were only $1.99, and they come with 10 bowling pins and 2 bowling balls. So let's see what they look like in our bowling alley. Okay, that is so insanely cute. I am obsessed! Now let's make the guardrails for the bowling ball so we can cover up this white foam board. I cut a 1-inch strip of black foam board, and I covered the sides in my silver craft paper, and I did have to join it over here just because my bowling lane is 34 inches and my foam board was only 30 inches. I then cut a 2-inch strip of black craft paper, and again I had to join this one to get the length. I lay my black craft paper down on the table, and then I stick my 1-inch piece right on the top, leaving a 1/2-inch overhang on one side. So my foam board measures 34 inches and the black craft paper measures 34.5. I made a couple more and I placed them on contact paper instead of my printable, and I don't know, I feel like I like this a little bit better. I don't know, what do you guys think? This is it with the contact paper and this is it with the printable. I just wish that we couldn't see where the printables met each other. It's like driving me nuts. After much deliberation, I decided to keep this one just because I already printed it and we can just use the other one for a different project. I did add some strips of black craft paper just to break up the lanes from this area over here. And speaking of this area over here, we definitely need some seating and some shelving so the adults can put their bowling balls on it. And then we also need bowling ball return machines. So let's start building those now. So let's start with the bowling ball return machine. I cut a piece of foam board down to 2 inches by 5 inches, and I used something round to draw a circle about 1/2 inch away from the edge. I then cut it out and trimmed the edges in silver craft paper. And you guys, I know that this isn't the best job in the world, but I tried to do this like 10 times and this is the best that I can do. So we're just gonna go with it. Cut a piece that measures 1.5 by 5 inches and place it on the back on the side. Place a piece that measures 1.5 by 1.5 on the top. another 1.5 by 5 inch piece to the other side, and a 2 by 5 inch piece to the back. Cut a 1 inch strip that measures 6 inches and place it down to the bottom in the middle of the piece that we just made. And notice that all of my edges are finished and covered in silver craft paper. And then for the part that the ball actually rolls on when it comes out of the hole, I'm going to use a black piece of wire that I found at Home Depot. It measures about 16 inches long, and I'm just going to bend it in the middle to make like a long U shape. And now we're going to take the ends of our wire and place it right under our opening here like this, and then you are going to mark where the wire meets the foam board. Let's now use something pointy to poke a little hole where we marked, and then repeat for the other mark. And now we can take the ends of our wire and insert it into those holes that we just made. And I do remember when I went to the bowling alley that we had a little personal LED screen like right next to the ball return. I can't remember what we were using it for because I didn't really use it, but I know there was an LED screen there. So let's put one right next to our bowling ball return machine. So I printed one from Google and I cut it out and I stuck it onto a piece of foam board. And now I'm going to take a piece of plexiglass and place it right over the top. And now I'm going to stick the back of it onto a black piece of contact paper. I then cut out my corners and I trim down my sides to about 1/2 inch so that when I roll it over like this, it creates a nice border while also covering my sides, giving me a cute little bowling ball LED screen that is covered all the way around in just one step. And to attach it to our return machine, I cut a 1/4 inch strip down to 7 inches and I trimmed the sides in my silver contact paper. I then cut a 1 inch strip that's about 3 inches. This should be the exact length between the bottom of your machine and where the wire starts. I then glue the 1/4 inch strip to the middle of the 1 inch strip. And I did forget to mention that I cut one end of my 1/4 inch strip at an angle so that when we place our screen on the top of it, it is tilted like that. Let's now glue our shorter 1 inch strip to our longer 1 inch strip, and the top of it can serve as a support for the wire. I then add a tiny little printable to the side. I repeated to make another one, and you guys, now we have 2 little bowling ball return machines, and they are so adorable. Now, as for the seating, you guys, I don't know why, no matter how big I make my bills, it's never enough space. I don't have enough space for seating. Like, this set is 120 inches long, and I still don't have enough space for seating. Oh my goodness, I definitely have a problem. I do want to make shelves for the middle right here just so we can put some bowling balls on it and it also break up these 2 spaces. So there's definitely not enough space over on this side for any seats. So I was thinking maybe we can put a few seats over there on that back wall. So let's cut a piece of foam board that measures 4 inches by 3 inches and another piece that measures 3 inches by 3 inches and join it on the side that measures 3 inches. Cut a piece of red craft foam down to 2.5 by 2 3/4 and place it on the piece that measures 3 by 3. This is going to be our seat. And then for the backrest, we're going to cut a piece that measures 2.5 by 3.5 and place it on the back. And of course, I trimmed my edges in silver craft paper. I then made a couple more, and now that we have our seats, let's make a stand for them to go on. I'm going to use this 1/2 inch wooden dowel that I found at Home Depot. Cut a piece that measures 3 inches and a piece that measures 2 inches, and I placed a 2 inch piece right in the middle of the 3 inch piece. I repeat to make another one, and then I join them by taking a piece that measures 9.5 and attaching it in the middle on both sides. Let's now cut a piece that measures 11 inches and place that going across the top. Paint it black, and now we can place our little chairs on the top. And now we have a nice little set of bowling alley chairs that our dolls can sit on if they get tired of bowling. I then made a couple more shelves using the same method as we used to make that shelf back there. But this one is a little bit bigger. It measures 14 inches wide by 6 inches tall by 2 inches deep, and the smaller one measures 6 inches wide by 6 inches tall by 2 inches deep. And as I said, I want to place these in the middle right here so that we can break up the food court and the bowling lanes. And we can place a smaller one on the other side to create a little entryway to the bowling lanes. And I know that's a lot of space for a lot of bowling balls, so I decided to get these tennis balls, and I think I'm just going to paint them different colors, and we can use these as our bowling balls because they're pretty much the same size as these. I also made these 2 larger screens using the same method as we used to make the smaller screens, and I wanted to hang these over the bowling lane, so I think I'm gonna go do that right now, and I'll be right back with the finished product. I added a My Miniature Things sign over my LED screens, and this is what I got. right, you guys, we did it and it looks so good. I was kind of skeptical going into it just because, as I said, I've only been to a bowling alley like one time, but Google really helped me figure out all the things that we needed to put in there to make it the best bowling alley ever. I really like the pool table and the bowl machine return machine. I don't know why I can't say that, you guys. Like, you have no idea. When I was filming this video, every single time I had to say that, I had to film it over and over and over because I kept saying machine return. Like, I don't know. Whatever. You know what I mean. Bowling ball return machine. Got it. Okay. Pool table and that was definitely my favorite, but I want to hear from you guys. What was your favorite thing that we built today? Please leave it down in the comments. And if you like this video, please give it a huge thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. That's another one, you guys. Every single time, subscribe. Okay, when I'm just saying it by myself, I can totally just say it, but when it's in a sentence, it's like I fumble over it. I don't know why. Please subscribe, and don't forget to tune in next week to see where our dolls go on their next Dolls Day Out. Bye.